Pittsburgh Steelers fans, we are here. We are ready for the 2020 season. We know who the 53 members of the Steelers 2020 team is, at least for a day.
Yep.
And I am here. This is Dave Schofield, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, here with podcast producer Bryan Anthony Davis. Bryan, how are you? How was this craziness?
Wow, I tell you what, I was not expecting any surprises, and I think we got a few surprises here and there on the roster. So I'm glad Cutdown Day is here. Now, let me preface this with Cutdown is a dreaded day if you're a player. And I understand it. When they come up to you, Dave, and they say, "Hey, coach wants to see you. Bring your playbook." That's even worse than, "Hey, honey, I'm pregnant, but it's not yours." Or, "I'm sorry, sir, we're out of shrimp on the buffet." So
I don't know if there's much worse than that.
Yeah. So I feel bad for these guys, but and this is not a time. 2020 is so weird that they really didn't get a chance to showcase their talent. But for 16 of these individuals, most of these guys will be, most of the 16, there weren't 16 cuts, there was more than that, but 16 of these fellows will probably be back, and and some will get poached.
Yeah.
So people are going to get an opportunity. So it's not the end of the road for them, but it's still a dark day for some of these people.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this just to clarify. They technically won't be poached. They will be claimed off waivers, just so people understand. I know, I'm giving you a hard time. Well, not all of them are claimed off waivers. Players with less than 4 accrued seasons go on waivers. Players such as Big Dan McCullers, he's free to sign anywhere he wants. He does not have to go through waivers because of how many years he has in the NFL. So for those guys that were cut that don't have 4 or more accrued seasons, they have to go on waivers. That will happen by 12 p.m. on Sunday. And then so roughly sometime between 12 and 1 is when the NFL will officially announce who all has been claimed off waivers, and then teams can officially sign their practice squads. So just letting everyone know that's how it is right now. We'll be having a practice squad tracker article coming out here soon. I'm doing the show. We already know that one report is the punter that was cut is reportedly they're wanting to sign him to the practice squad. So that's one report that we know already.
Corliss Waltman.
Yes, before we get into this position by position, just overall question. You only get one. Whether it was someone who was cut or someone who made the team. You were told 2020 Steelers cut down. One thing that shocked you the most. Not 2, not 3, not 5. You have to pick one. What's your most shocking?
My son, Carlos Davis.
That he made the team.
Yes.
That's crazy. We'll talk about that when we get there. That kind of leads into the other one that I could say of who he made the team over top of. So I'll go to the other side of the ball, and I'll have to say, as one, someone that you guys said when we talked in the preview that would be shocked if was cut, one Ryan Switzer. It's not just that he was cut. I'm really shocked they're only keeping 5. I'm really shocked that the Steelers are only keeping 5 wide receivers. This is what they did last year. They only kept 5 right off the bat, but yet they signed their 6th before week 1 started because Johnny Holton ended up on the practice squad, then came in place of Tuzar Skipper the day before the game. So lots of crazy things going on. The best way to break it down, hey, I say let's just go through position by position. Right, Bryan?
Let's do it.
All right, here are your 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers for now, okay? 3 quarterbacks. Ben Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, Devlin Hodges. Are you surprised that they're at all?
No, not at all, because, originally if we talked about 2 months ago, I would have probably said that Duck was on his way out and it was going to be Paxton Lynch getting that job. However, Paxton really did not do anything to shine as far as reports. So it seemed that just also the fact that Devlin Duck knows the offense. He's had some experience. He's a pretty safe bet there. But, there are some guys floating out around there. I mean, if they decide that they want to bring a Dobbs back in, if they decide that they want to bring somebody else that was cut, I don't expect.
Go ahead and say it. We all know who everyone's thinking.
Everybody's thinking Josh Rosen. I don't expect that to happen. But, if they, if something happens that Case Keenum gets cut, yeah, they do it.
Of course, that's your boy right there.
But, there's also, what if they decide, hey, we want Mike Glennon in here?
Yeah.
What if they decide
there is nothing that says it's going to be Paxton Lynch? Honestly, I would have to say, my opinion, if it's somebody not named Paxton Lynch, if they keep another quarterback on the practice squad, they're not going to get much time. They're basically going to be someone that's going to be around, not get a lot of practice time. You're there as COVID insurance. I'm all for the Steelers bringing back who's more familiar with the system. That would be Josh Dobbs. I would be okay as a practice squad signee, unless he gets picked up out there. But that's the quarterbacks. Not much crazy is going on there. Let's go to the next one. This was one that a lot of people didn't know how they were going to go. The Steelers did keep 4. I'm still hoping that I got everything right, because one thing I have to say, the disclaimer, they didn't tell us who made the team. They told us who got cut. So I'm hoping that I have everything right. It adds up to 53, so I'm pretty sure this is right with what's sitting in front of me. Our 4, James Conner, Benny Snell Jr., Jalen Samuels, Anthony McFarland. The big surprise there was a lot of people had somebody like a Kareth White over Samuels, or something like that. What did you think there, Ryan, with those 4?
You know what? The top 3 were pretty much no-brainers. You knew Connor and Snell were staying. Anthony McFarland Jr. being, I still consider a 4th-round draft pick pretty high up there. So we talked about this a couple of weeks back. Anything below a 5th or below is probably a later round draft pick. So I knew he was going to stay, because unless he was just completely awful, and there's no reports that he was. I just thought Samuels was a guy that was possibly on his way out. That's the guy that I thought, if there could be a surprise, that it would be Samuels. But this is where it comes down to. This is why they did not keep Kareth White. Because, and this goes into another position that we're going to talk about, because they kept somebody else at the other position. And I'm not going to spoil it yet.
Yes.
Because we're going to talk about it in a bit, and we'll circle back to it. But that's the reason Kareth White is not on the roster, because Kareth White would have been on the roster for his speed and his return ability. So that means you keep a guy like Jalen Samuels with his versatility.
Yes. And this is something that I talked about when Jeff and we did our podcast. I was on his Let's Ride podcast Friday morning doing our 53-man projections. These were the 4 I picked. The reason I said that is I think they all 4 bring something different to the table. I felt that Kareth White was very similar to Anthony McFarland with what they bring, with what they each bring, other than Kareth White and his kickoff returns. But there's another answer for that we'll get to quickly, because we are really quick going to say fullback Derek Watt next.
No brainer.
There we go. So let's get on to this one. This was the one that surprised me, not in who, as much as how many wide receivers they kept. I thought they would keep 6. They only kept 5. And then 2 of the ones that people thought were going to be kept, they didn't keep them, and they kept someone else who I did have as my sleeper pick to make the team. And that was after the 4 locks were Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. And then the other wide receiver they kept was Ray McLeod.
And Ray is who we were talking about.
Ray is going to run the kick off.
So
the
Ray
up kicky thingy. Is that what it is?
Yeah, my oh my gosh. The runny. Oh my gosh, my wife used to call it.
That's from an old story there.
The runny up thing.
But Ray McLeod, the reason I was saying I had McLeod over Deion Kane. The reason I said they didn't need Deion Kane is because when Jeff described everything that he could do, I said, you just described Chase Claypool other than he did it last year. So I felt that Kane and Claypool were very similar receivers. With McLeod, I said he checked so many boxes. He doesn't just check off, yes, he can be a wide receiver. He doesn't, and they doesn't just check off that, yes, he can be a kickoff returner and probably the backup punt returner, because I think Deontay Johnson's going to hold that down. But he's also a special teams gunner. And now you have 2 gunners on the team with him and Justin Lane. So there you go. Deion Kane did not play special teams at all. So that's why he's there. Ryan Switzer, special teams wise, really only offered a punt returner and that's not really a reason to keep him around. I'm going to go out on a limb and say with Ryan Switzer, who did get released, that unless he gets claimed off waivers, not only will he be on the practice squad, he's going to be back on the 53 before too long, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's not even a limb.
Yeah.
That's a scaffold.
The only limb it's going off on is that he makes it to where he can come back to the practice squad.
Yeah.
I don't know that people were lining up for Ryan Switzer. So we'll see. But I think that he would be someone that's a prime candidate for that. Anything else you want to say about these wide receivers, Brian?
Yes. Ray McLeod basically cost 3 players their jobs. Mm-hmm. Ryan Switzer, Deion Kane, and as far as I'm concerned, Kareth White.
Yeah.
So they found some value in Ray. Plus, he's got a great name. He's Ray.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's because I would think that he'll be doing kickoff returns as well, and I mean, there'll be a possibility that he'll be doing that. And could you imagine just going Ray? I mean,
well, hey. Love it. I know one thing that's happened in the past is, he might have had a few fumbling issues in his past NFL experience. If that's the case, he will be very short-lived, Ray McLeod. So, but it's his job. He's got it. And he was kind of my camp sleeper, my Isaac Redman Award nominee for this year.
And I am bummed out about the Switzer thing, because I said a lot of things about Switzer being the guy, and I know Donald in the live chat, Donald backs it up too. He's a Switzer guy like me. I'm pretty bummed because I liked Ryan Switzer and I liked what he could do on short yardage and
yes, I do. I thought he brought something different as a wide receiver, as that possession underneath short yardage receiver. That's why I don't think his days in the NFL, I don't think are done, because if he's not somewhere else, he's going to be back in Pittsburgh. But I have to bring it up. Mark Davison, one of our blokes from down under, it says Ray to the touchdown zone. There, Mark. And if you did not check out Marky D and Maddie P's audio only podcast on our podcast platform that came out this morning, you've got to go make sure you check that out. So
yeah, good stuff. Their follow up to their debut. These guys are doing great.
Yep.
And I love it. Great job. I didn't get a chance to tell them that this week, but fantastic stuff.
Moving on, tight ends. This was one that partway through camp, I'm like, let's get a little creative and get people thinking that maybe they only keep 2. Try to get Gentry in the practice squad, and that's one that they could use as pull up on game day. Then the more I thought about it, like, nah, they're better off doing that somewhere else. So maybe that's what they're trying to do with wide receiver. But so it's the 3. It's McDonald, Ebron, Gentry.
Yeah, once again, no brainer. They want to give Gentry a little more time. But I agreed with everything that you were saying about Gentry, that they could stash him.
Because I don't know other teams would. I mean, if he made a lot of progress this year, you didn't see anything from him last year with 1 catch for 4 yards, was barely active. I still wouldn't be shocked if he's not active very much this year. But the one thing about Gentry is if he made a big jump this year, nobody knew about it. So he could have been a guy, but I also understand that it could be that it makes sense to keep 3.
Yeah, you know what? I think that he's going to be active because I don't think you're going to get 16 games out of both Ebron and McDonald. I mean, you might get 12 or 13 out of them, but there's going to be some banging ups here and there.
Yeah. So tight end, no big surprise there. Little bit of a surprise on the offensive line. They did keep 9. I thought that might be where they only kept 8, but I understand you're going to have 8 active. every week. So having that other guy, I just thought maybe that's a prime candidate from someone to pull up for from the practice squad just to dress and stand there in case there's an emergency. But that's not what they decided to do. They went with 9. They kept the extra center in J.C. Hassenauer. I thought they might keep last year's 7th round pick Derwin Gray, but they have some other players at that position. So they're right now the Steelers have 3 centers because you've got Marquise Pouncey, you've got Wisniewski as your backup center guard, and you got Hassenauer. Here's the question. Do you think there's any chance the Steelers are being very tight-lipped and maybe they're wanting to use Wisniewski at guard and put Filer back at tackle? I don't think so, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
That's something that could be a possibility, but the way that Cowher talked, the way that Tomlin talked the other day was that this is a pretty good battle and they're doing some really good things. And when I say there, I'm talking about Zach Banner and Chuks Okorafor. So they have not anointed a winner there. The way he's talking is that one of these guys is going to get that position. I really think that they want Wisniewski in that next man up role to be able to put him somewhere, because here's the thing.
Oh, awesome stuff. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think awesome stuff might have just hit the nail on the head.
I'm not looking at it, but okay. If he's going to steal my thunder, I'm not going to.
No, go for it. I'm bringing it up. You say your thing, and then I'll read his because I just didn't want to lose it.
Well, actually, that's not completely stealing my thunder, but what I'm saying here is if something happens to Pouncey and Wisniewski is starting, then you're uprooting 2 guys.
Yeah.
Instead of 1. You have to bring somebody in. If they're happy with the play at right tackle, keep Filer at guard. Somebody gets hurt, and somebody's going to get hurt. Especially when you have older guys here. So Wisniewski really is going to get playing time, but he's going to be more beneficial in that role than starting him.
Yeah, and like Awesome Stuff 1983 said, he's right. With DeCastro injured, you need another center in case Stephen has to fill in at guard. Right now, you don't know if DeCastro is going to be good to go week 1. So that would have Wisniewski at guard. So you need to have another center. That is a great point. And that might be a spot that if DeCastro comes back this week, maybe the Steelers make a move there. Okay. Maybe they make a move there. So anything else you want to say about offensive line? Because I'll bring up our super chat here when we get to that topic here in just a second.
Not really. I figured that there's nobody here that they're afraid to stash. Like we're going to talk about some different positions that I think some guys were kept because they do not want to stash on the practice squad. I think we pretty much understood this all along. Maybe Hassenauer is the biggest surprise, but he had some experience last year on the roster and he played. He was on the active roster on week 17 when Marquise Pouncey got put on injured reserve to end the season. So, and it wasn't even him earlier in the year because it was Patrick Morris who had come up when Pouncey was suspended, but then he got claimed off waivers when the Steelers tried to put him back on the practice squad by Denver, and he's still there. So he's there. This is a guy, smart move, because that's a really good point that if you don't know about DeCastro right now, the best thing to do is to have not your backup center be someone who's going to be starting somewhere else if he's got to play for DeCastro. So that's a really great point. Go ahead. And Boing Boom Shaq says if Pouncey goes down, Stephen goes in at center, even if he's playing guard. Yeah, I get that. Possibly. But the thing is, you're uprooting. I mean, so you're moving somebody over to center, and then you're bringing somebody else in. Yeah. That's why I like him better in that reserve spot. But if he has to play for DeCastro, that works. Yeah, and that works well.
And like you said, I don't know how they would move that, but you still want to have another guy that's at center, at the time. So
absolutely.
So we'll see how this goes. Let's roll to the defense because here we get into some good stuff. Here's the big one. We'll bring it up. €3 from Beer Bottle says cholesterol free now without McCullers. Brian, what do you think of this 6? Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt. I can't believe I said that. It's Stefan Wisniewski, Stephon Tuitt, Tyson Alualu, Chris Wormley, Isaiah Buggs, and Carlos Davis.
Look, I'm really surprised. And if you can go back, but if you go back to our draft show when we were talking about the 7th round pick, and I am going to be getting on the line real quick and texting Lance Williams and tell him that he owes me a jersey because I said Carlos Davis would replace McCullers, and he said no way. So I've got to let Lance know that I won that bet.
I forgot about that.
Yep, you can check the transcripts because it is true. I am surprised that I won that bet. I never thought I would, especially with COVID, which I expected a lot of veterans to keep their jobs. I thought that Carlos Davis could be somebody that they can stash free on the with no problem, but I just don't. I think they're looking more towards the future on this, and he cost a little more money.
Well, I mean, they did save some money here, but the Steelers saved some money earlier in the day. They restructured the last player they could restructure to actually save any money for 2020, and that was David DeCastro. So they pushed $3.85 million into 2021, which they're already in trouble in 2021, but we'll see how that goes to save some money there. And everyone's wondering, are they going to make a move? They're going to sign someone? I still say they just needed to do that in order to be able to have the amount of money they needed to go in to have the last two guys on the roster count and to sign their practice squad and to have some money left in order to make a move during the season when someone gets hurt. Because when someone gets hurt and goes on IR, they still count towards the salary cap and everything else. And then you've got to bring in somebody else and pay them. So that might have just been what that move was for. But this saved a little bit of money. I mean, not a lot, but when you talk about replacement, I'm really shocked with the Carlos Davis. I thought maybe Mondu. I thought maybe the big 6'9" guy from Kentucky. I thought maybe Savon Walker. I never thought any of those guys would not get in, and it would be Davis. I had him really far down, mainly because I was convinced by our own Jeffrey Benedict when he looked at his college film that he was like, his film is just not good from college. But, you got assistant head coach John Mitchell, who is a defensive line guy. You got Carl Dunbar. Maybe they just saw something in there that they're like, this guy's not being used right. And the fact that they think enough of him, frankly, I don't think we'll see him active on game days. If he's active in week 1 over somebody like Buggs, unless there's an injury, I'm going to be like, they must think the world of him. But this is what no preseason did to us in 2020. We had no clue with Carlos Davis. We had undrafted free agents being more likely, or XFL guys probably being more likely than Carlos Davis. But here he is. So do you trust the Steelers? I trust the Steelers.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Just because they're not talking about somebody, there's 90-some guys to talk about, and there's no eyes on them. So, this is a coach's dream. This is Belichick's dream. This is Tomlin's dream. Hey, I don't have to give anybody any information. You saw what the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy did on their live broadcast of their scrimmage or their live day. They went without any uniform numbers, so nobody could see who's doing what and know who they are, who these guys are, and which is kind of a violation. But they were able to sneak it past the goalie. But what I'm saying here is, we don't know how he impressed. He did something to stay. And apparently they believe in him more than we do. It's easier to go ahead and keep the young guy when you're like, we're not getting that much more out of Daniel McCullers. I feel bad because I
heard he had slimmed down. I heard he was playing well. I thought this was the one year that you shouldn't even guess about McCullers. He was in. I thought that was crazy. So,
practice squad though, he will be back
unless somebody else grabs him, but not. You have to be playing the 3-4 in order to have a need for Dan McCullers. This also tells me that Carlos Davis is more athletic. That the Steelers were. Remember, McCullers and Alu were still supposed to be fighting for this nose tackle job. And then McCullers doesn't even make the team. That tells me that they're going with the more of the athletic nose tackle, more of the Javon Hargrave type nose tackle that can also play defensive tackle, because I think they're going to play a lot more sub package. Why not get Mike Hilton and Cam Sutton on the field more? So you might only see two defensive linemen a lot. But
the one last thing that I want to say about this, they believe in Isaiah Buggs. And I think Isaiah Buggs is really could be one of those unsung heroes that gets in there and plays well maybe when a Wormley's gone. I know he just got here, but he doesn't have much of a contract here. He might only have 1 year left. So, but I really like the Wormley signing. I think this is a very strong defensive line. And this is a guy that they can season in Carlos Davis.
I'm not going to bring it up, but in the live chat, they said his computer must have got wiped, so he doesn't have the pictures anymore. Is why Dan McCullers isn't there.
Wait, if that's the thing, Danny Smith Jr. is worried. Then
it's so crazy because every year we're like, no, cut McCullers. I was finally to a point where I was like, McCullers is going to be on this team. They need someone big on the goal line. I said it Friday on Jeff's show. You kind of need that guy, and this is the year they cut him. It's funny. It just goes to show how much we don't know what we're talking about. So which I said that right as then we got the super chat from Snowman throws $5 into the tip jar. We thank you. I guess these are American. We already had the euros earlier. He says, he says, I guess they don't care about McCullers' naked pictures he had of Mike Tomlin. I don't know if it was Tomlin. It might have been higher up than Tomlin, for him to stick around the way he did, if you ask one Jefferson Hartman. But what Snowman used, he used the super chat feature, which you can type in your comment, donate any money amount you want to the show, and we will make sure that we get to your comment no matter what, unless it's got something inappropriate in it. I think that's understandable. So,
you know what, Dave? If I could jump in,
sure.
Why don't we take a break? Let's take a break and come on back in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if we were doing this as two different shows or one. So for those of you here watching live on YouTube, don't go anywhere. We are not leaving. We will be here. But for our audio listeners, we are going to take a break, and you can come back in with part 2 of the 53-man roster breakdown right after this break. And we are back here at Behind the Steel Curtain on our YouTube channel, looking at the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers initial 53-man roster. We've got to say that it's initial because this could change tomorrow. But I am Dave Schofield, co-editor Behind the Steel Curtain. I am here with Bryan Anthony Davis, our podcast producer, and we are breaking it down. We probably should have stopped right before we got into the defense and done offense in part 1, or we should have done the special teams there. But we're breaking it down of all the surprises, all the players that we got. Bryan, how do you feel so far?
I tell you what, I'm excited about this team. The guy that has the big heart, and it's probably going to explode someday. But I'm that guy that feels bad for these guys that got cut. But you're going to see, with 16 guys and no restrictions on a practice squad, you're going to see some of these players back. So guys like Switzer and guys like McCullers, I don't think you've seen the last of them.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't seen the last of them in the NFL, because if they don't get grabbed by somebody else, they're going to be with the Steelers, with the practice squad, with the rules this year. Just to clarify, in case people don't realize this, 6 practice squad spots out of the 16 can be players with an unlimited amount of accrued seasons. So you do not have to guys that in the past that they had to be practice squad eligible, that they weren't. That's not the case anymore. It is all about, it could be anybody. For 6 of them, 10 of them, 10 of the practice squad guys have to be your typical practice squad players. So we already talked about the defensive line. We talked about the big surprise of Dan McCullers not being kept and Carlos Davis making the team, which was really, so Bryan, your son, is he going to be able to, I guess he can't score you any tickets this year because so far we don't have any, but
Carlos,
maybe a jersey that doesn't come from China. Maybe that you can get that.
Yeah. And maybe some access to some interviews, Carlos.
There you go. There you
Davis, go. Take care of the family, Carlos.
So, moving on to outside linebacker, a little bit of surprise here when the news came out. I think it was yesterday. Was it yesterday or early this morning? The time has been crazy for me lately.
Tuzar?
When we found out about Tuzar.
That was last night.
That was last night. So I'm not crazy. Tuzar skipper, we found out last night that he was released. We'll see if he gets claimed. If not, he's a prime practice squad guy. They also cut Jaron Elliott, who they just brought in, but they wouldn't have even brought in Elliott if they knew, if it wasn't for the new rules of the practice squad. They're fairly certain he wasn't going to make it. Then I thought maybe he would whenever this went down with Tuzar. But the Steelers are rolling with 4 outside linebackers. Probably the biggest endorsement here is for one, Alex Highsmith, that they probably feel that he is their main reserve. So you're going with TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Alex Highsmith, and Ola Denier. So if you don't think Highsmith is ready to get those snaps, then you might be keeping 5 guys. So do you think, Bryan, are you all right with Highsmith and Denier as the backups here, and that's it?
Absolutely. I do not have a problem with that. Remember, there have been times that they kept 3 outside linebackers, and it was just Chickalo. Mm-hmm. Anthony Chickalo was your only reserve at one point. I think that was 2018. So, now you have Bud and TJ, which you feel pretty strong with, but they are loving and they're talking glowingly about Highsmith. And it seems like he is really turning some heads. So he was their second pick, even though he was picked in the 3rd round. I really think they believe in this guy. So I'm excited of what he brings. And I just want to go back to draft day when people were saying who, Alex Highsmith. And then you start seeing sound bites from Dabo Sweeney of Clemson saying, when we played this guy, he was he is going to be huge someday. He had 14 sacks his last year in college. Now and those weren't max sacks completely because he had a sack against Clemson. They played some talent there too. UNC Charlotte. Yeah. So, as far as that goes, I really think that they're viewing him as a starter next year because they probably don't believe that Bud's going to be back.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the Q&A the other day with Tony Defio and myself, are the Steelers prepping for life without Juju, Connor, and Bud? Well, yeah, and the reason Hayward wasn't in the titles because they didn't really bring anybody in to replace Hayward, but they brought these guys in to be next men up and men in waiting. And it looks like they love what they see from Highsmith. So he's probably going to be that next guy in, but I really think they believe in a Denny also.
Yeah.
And he's had some signs of brilliance when he's in there. So I'm excited for these 4. J-Roan, we're going to see him again. Tuzar, we're not. Tuzar might be on the Giants next week.
Yeah, it's hard to say. So one thing, I know there's some stuff going on in the live chat because you mentioned Anthony Chickalo. Yes, he was released by the New Orleans Saints. We are going to do that at the end. We're going to talk about some of these former Steelers that have been released by their teams because we'll talk about some of that stuff at the end. So for those of you talk about that in the live chat away. We're not ignoring you. We're going to get back to that. the thing that we have to remember about Alex Highsmith is he is living up to the hype. And you're like, the hype? It was a guy most of us hadn't heard of, blah, blah, blah. Steelers fans, you need to clear your minds. You need to clear your minds. Chase Claypool is not our first-round pick, and Alex Highsmith is not our second-round pick. You have to remember that. The Steelers did not have a first-round pick. It was Minkah Fitzpatrick. And the Steelers did not have a regular third-round pick. It was Devin Bush from where they traded up the year before. You realize that Alex Highsmith and James Conner were only, I think, drafted 2 or 3 spots apart in their own drafts. And James Conner was the 4th selection by the Steelers in that draft, where this year, because of everything else that happened, he was the 2nd selection. So we still think of James Conner as that 2nd, 3rd round pick. Okay. That's what Alex Highsmith is. So to me, he is living up to the hype that so many people were thinking of him as like a 2nd round pick because he was the 2nd guy taken. So for him to be doing this well is fantastic because I already think the expectations are higher for him than what they should be. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I'm going to back you up by saying that if people aren't following this, he was a compensatory pick.
Yes, he's the Le'Veon Bell pick.
Very late.
Yeah.
Very late in the 3rd as well.
Yeah.
And when you're saying who about some of these guys, nobody's saying who about Deontay Johnson right now. We had so many owls because everybody was saying who when he was drafted. And a lot of people thought about him as a 2nd round pick, and he was a 3rd round pick. The same thing that you're saying here, because they didn't have a 2nd round pick last year. So, they scout. And when I talked about this on draft day, you and I and everybody else, all the talking heads, anybody that talks Steelers, we do not have scouting departments that go out. The Pittsburgh Steelers do, and they do due diligence, and they do very well at it too. And you've seen how they've drafted over the years, and they really know what they have in this guy. Now, they're going to miss every team. Look how much Belichick misses.
Yeah.
But, the odds are that they are going to draft better than a lot of teams and draft high better than a lot of teams. And I really think they did it with Highsmith.
Yes. And this is important to remember that was where he was drafted. He's doing well. He's living up to the hype so far. Let's roll on with this. I have so many ideas going through my head. I can't even remember which one it is. So let's get rolling here and let's look at the inside linebacker. This might have been the easiest one because I still have him at 4. I know we'll talk about Marcus Allen later, that some people look at him. I'm still not calling him an inside linebacker. He is just a guy that can fill in there if they need it until the Steelers actually list him there. So we'll keep him with the safety. So we're just going to stick with the 4 of Vince Williams, Devin Bush, UG3, Ulysses Gilbert III, and Robert Spillane. That's your inside linebackers. How do you feel here? Is this one of those places that probably concerns you the most?
Yes, and the reason being is that this is probably your least amount of depth on this team, and that includes the safety position. I really think that something happens with Vinny Vidi Vici, something happens with Devin Bush Jr. There's going to be one of these guys coming in, and we've seen it before. You go and Shazier goes down, you bring Sean Spence off of his couch. They don't have an LJ Fort anymore, but they have Spillane is probably one of your better special teamers, and he's really good. But I don't really know who he is as an inside linebacker. UG3 didn't play a lot last year. He was injured, Dave. Yeah. So what I'm thinking here is, are they looking elsewhere? Or are they, and we're going to talk about him later, or are they grooming Mr. Allen as a Mark Barron type?
Yeah. Are they looking at playing a different kind of defense where they're going to use more secondary guys that can then come up in the box, maybe with Terrell Edmonds, Marcus Allen, guys like that. You have to remember, they don't have to do what they've always done. So the other thing to remember with that is who was, last year you had Bush, Williams, and Barron. Who was the next guy in? That was Tyler Medikevich.
Yeah.
How did you really feel about him as a linebacker and not a special teams player?
You valued him as a special teamer. You got scared when he wasn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you look at a guy that they had and they lost, LJ Fort. He was more of a player that he was so regarded when he got to Baltimore that they locked him up for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's a guy that they really liked. I felt more comfortable with an LJ Ford in there. You don't have the days like you had when you had Arthur Moats, who was really good at playing inside and outside. He was the Wisniewski. We're talking about Wisniewski playing guard and center. Arthur Moats was so good at that. I would have loved to see them pick up a guy like, and I'm going to butcher this name, Kamale Correa, who was with Baltimore, and then last year did very well and ended up starting with Tennessee down the stretch. I'd like to see them get a hybrid guy like that you're very comfortable with in starting. I just don't know enough about UG3 right now because we didn't see a lot of them. We saw great stuff from him in preseason, but that's third and fourth string guys that he's playing against. So they believe in him. I know that. But this is where your depth comes into question. And if something happens, there is going to be a chasm in the middle.
Yeah. And I think this also, you look at the Steelers' depth and everything at inside linebacker. I think this speaks to the depth at inside linebacker across the NFL. That I just don't know that there's those players. They're gonna ride these guys. And it's kind of one of those things. You can't have 5-star backups at every position. You can't do that in the NFL. Everyone who's still screaming about the Steelers need another backup quarterback, you can't have a 5-star backup at every position. The Steelers' eggs are all in the Ben Roethlisberger basket for 2020. It's how it is. You just can't do it. There's this thing called a salary cap. The Steelers know what they're doing when it comes to this cap, but you just can't do it everywhere. So this is one of those positions that they got to have a plan, or that this is, or they'll come up with the plan when it happens. So let's move to, here's a surprise a little bit. I felt that 5 cornerbacks were locked in. I really did. The fact that they kept the 6th was very interesting. And not only that, they kept the duplicate. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. When they kept Joe Hayden, Steven Nelson, Mike Hilton, Cam Sutton, Justin Lane, and undrafted rookie free agent James Pierre out of Florida Atlantic. Why am I calling him a duplicate, Brian?
I don't know, actually. I know he's...
Yes, you do. We talked about it before we went on air.
He's 6'2"?
No, the reason he's a duplicate is because he doesn't even have his own number on the Steelers.
Oh, yeah, we did talk about this.
Come on, I set you up great for that.
Yeah, I know.
He doesn't have his own number.
Hey,
he is number 26. So is Anthony McFarland.
This is what we're going to do.
Okay.
Say that again.
Okay.
I'll cut it out. And so they'll never get there.
No, we're not. But I will say it again. Brian, why is he a duplicate?
Oh, I'll tell you, Dave. It's because he has the same number as Anthony McFarland Jr.
Yes. I mean, he's a guy they brought in, didn't even give him his own number. That's the definition of a dash guy, as Lance Williams would say. That's a dash guy. When you don't even get a number, you get the same number as a 4th-round pick that that the Steelers are going to keep no matter what. You've got to really do something to make this roster. And he did. Like you said, he's a 6'2" corner. He brings a little bit something different than the other guys. He's a bigger corner. Not going to be shocked if The Steelers have this every year. They have a guy that is just inactive all the time. This is what I see in James Pierre. Keep him, develop him. You don't even have to have him active on game day unless you're dealing with injury. And there's your guy. Steeler fans, you didn't get to see anything from him because of no preseason, and you're probably still not going to get to see much from him for a while for this season. But the Steelers saw enough of him to make sure that they kept him around. What do you think, Bryan?
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you about him. Do you remember in baseball, I think they still have this in baseball, a Rule 5 draft? The Rule 5 players that you have to keep them on the roster, or they're going to be picked up if they're not on the 40-man roster, the 25-man roster. If they're a Rule 5 pickup, if you don't keep them, they're gone and you lose them. Yeah. So I'm looking at James Pierre, Jimmy P. I'm looking at Jimmy P as this guy that they cannot afford to put on the practice squad because of his size, there's been some hype about him that they need to put him on the active roster or he will get snapped up.
Yes.
And I think they noticed that right away. So it's so much safer to keep this guy because you don't want to lose him. You want to develop him. So when you're talking about never starting him, not giving him a hat, and developing this guy, he's basically going to be a practice squad player on the active roster
that no one else can grab.
Yes.
An unpoachable guy is what you would like to say.
The only thing I want poached are eggs.
Yeah, there you go. Well, let's say this. I'm going to say the same thing about James Pierre right now as I said a year ago about Justin Lane. The best thing that could happen to James Pierre in 2020 is for him to not play a defensive snap.
Absolutely.
And that's best for the Steelers and for him, just like Justin Lane last year. Let him develop. I'm sure Lane, I'm assuming Lane's ahead of him on the depth chart, mainly because Lane, like I said before, Lane is your gunner on special teams, so he's going to get a helmet on game day. Now, if someone goes down and they need someone, who knows if Pierre is, because we don't know because of the preseason. We don't know how Lane's developed as a cornerback. We don't know what Pierre actually does. All we hear is the practice reports. So, because he was getting some hype, the Steelers kept him, and that's good. You don't have to worry about him. You ready to roll a safety, or you have anything else you want to say about corner?
As far as corner goes, why the lack of love for Justin Lane? I know you just talked about it. That he
was great on special teams last year
in the depth chart, but depth chart. But what everybody's saying here, I'm seeing it a lot. Well, Pierre outplayed Lane. We don't know that.
Yeah.
We just
with all the cameras we had at practice and all the preseason games we got to see, we can't make those judgments. We really can't.
And just like what you and Jeff were saying a couple weeks back on the preview, with all the hype for why is there a lot of hype for Chase Claypool and Alex Highsmith? Are they trying to pull a swerve? I mean, and I said this earlier in the show, you can't talk about 90 some guys. You really can't. Now, the media can when they're seeing them, but they're not seeing them. So we don't know the inner workings. I really think Justin Lane is one of those guys that's going to be making that giant leap that giant leap in 2020. But we don't want to see much of them.
Don't want to see much of them. That's what we're going to say. We just don't really want to see these. So that's fine. So they kept 6 cornerbacks. They kept the extra defensive back and one less linebacker, maybe, because we have 5 safeties, but at least one of which has also been playing at some linebacker, because they kept the exact 5 safeties that I predicted: Minkah Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, Jordan Dangerfield, Marcus Allen, Curtis Riley, and who's missing from this list, Bryan?
Who is
the only draft pick not to make the roster?
Antoine Brooks Jr.
Antoine Brooks Jr. I feel that Brooks Jr. and Allen were offering somewhat of the same thing, but Allen was more ready to step up into that linebacker role. So Brooks, so many people are like, oh, he's going to get claimed. I don't know why you would claim a 6th-round draft pick that you didn't get to see play in the preseason. I don't know why teams would want to do that and put him on your 53-man roster, because to get claimed, that's where they have to be. You can't claim a guy and put him on your practice squad. He's got to be on your roster. So I think Brooks is going to be on the practice squad. I might be wrong. I could eat some crow if he does get claimed, but I think the Steelers realize they would rather lose him than any of these other guys. You got Marcus Allen, who has apparently made some really big strides, and he's also someone who can fill in at linebacker, perhaps. Then you've got Curtis Riley, who technically can play safety and corner. He's played both in the NFL before. When he started an entire year in New York, it was at safety, where last year when he was listed as a corner, but he was more of a special teams guy. Jordan Dangerfield, some people I know Dale Lawley had completely left him off of everything that he spoke about at all in his projection. I feel like he maybe just forgot about him. I knew Jordan Dangerfield was going to make this team because he's the only one of the core 4 special teams guys that I said this before that was left from last year. I think he's your special teams captain. So what do you think of the safeties there, Brian?
You know what? I believe in the entire thing. I'm telling you right now that I really believe that what is going to happen here is that these were the guys that we expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these weren't my surprises. We've already talked about the surprises. We started off with the offense. We talked about the surprises at wide receiver. We talked about the surprises on the defensive line. This is just filling out the roster. And like we say, I'm not going to ask this question yet. Anything else about the safeties? Because I'm going to ask you some other questions, but we got to make sure we hit our specialists.
Now, you know what? I'm really comfortable with the safeties. They loved Curtis Riley. Yeah. The fans loved Curtis Riley. I knew they were going to keep him. It's really the hybrid position that he can play both corner and safety. So I expected him to stick. And I really think that he was another guy that would have been tough to keep on. I was going to say the supplemental list. Or why was I going to say that? But keep him on the practice squad.
Yes.
So
real quick, just to be thorough, special teams, nothing changed from last season. Chris Boswell, Cameron Canaday, Jordan Berry. Now, the report was when he was released that the punter, Corliss Waitman, did I say that right?
Waltman.
I thought it was Waitman.
I thought it was Waltman.
No, I think it's Waitman.
Okay.
That he is, they're expecting to sign him to the practice squad.
Yes.
Which I was right that I said that I thought they might keep a kicker, but I didn't think the Steelers had that kicker on their team. Someone put it out to me later, and I did not realize this because I had heard this, that he might have some experience at least kicking off, maybe even possibly field goals. If that's the case, he is the perfect practice squad kicker to keep with 16 guys. If he could come in for either one of them, if there's ever a problem. So Wes says I'm correct, and then it's Waitman.
Yes, and Donald says too Waitman. I thought it was Waltman, like X-Pac.
Mm-hmm. I'm only remembering of how I have to get it to show up right in the articles. So Brian, now that we've gone over all this, I got to ask you this. Before we've kind of mentioned some practice squad guys that were going. Like we said, we don't think Dan McCullers is done with the Steelers. We don't think Ryan Switzer is done with the Steelers. We think that unless they get claimed off waivers, those are your top 2 candidates to go on the practice squad, in my opinion. And like I said, I would be shocked. The only way I think Ryan Switzer does not get back on this roster in the first quarter of the season is if he's claimed off waivers and not on the Steelers practice squad. I think that he goes there and he gets bumped up. It could even be as early as week 1, much like a Johnny Holton thing. It's just what I have in my gut feeling because of how things are. I still can't believe they only have 5 wide receivers. That's not usually what the Steelers like to do, but they really like the top 4 that they got. So,
but they've got a practice squad, 16 guys.
Before we go on the other thing, there's a lot of former Steelers that were cut today.
Yes.
We've got Anthony Chickillo, didn't make it in New Orleans. We've got Joshua Dobbs cut in Jacksonville. We've got Sean Davis, that will affect the compensatory formula. It won't make the Steelers lose their top pick they'll get for Javon Hargrave, hopefully, but it did cut down on the chance of them getting 2 comp picks next year. Who's another one? I thought there was 4 that I'm trying to think of. Sean Davis, Josh Dobbs.
You said Chickillo.
I don't know. There might have even been more that's out there, but I can't think about it right now. But do you think the Steelers kick the tires on any of these former guys to come back? And if so, who do they bump?
Well, you know what?
Roosevelt Nix. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Darwin.
Who was Rosie Nix with?
He was with the Colts.
That's right. Okay.
But that was a couple days ago, I remember.
So yeah, Rosie Nix is I would not expect Rosie Nix to be back. The guy that I think would be back would probably be Davis. If anybody, because of the safety depth is not amazing, and he was not as bad as everybody thinks that he was. Dobbs is a possibility, but I think Duck has enough experience that it would be no problem. If Dobbs comes back, I would think it would be on the practice squad.
I would say if the Steelers are going to keep a fourth quarterback right now, I would be more in favor, meaning a fourth one on the practice squad. I would be more in favor of Josh Dobbs and Paxton Lynch. And I'm more in favor than that just because of familiarity.
And not only that, he's very mobile. And when you're preparing, and these mobile quarterbacks are popping up everywhere. You face Lamar Jackson twice a year, and you've seen this happen so many times last year when they picked up a running quarterback for the practice squad for 1 or 2 weeks to get ready for the Ravens, to get ready for the Cardinals. They would do that when they would have, and Josh Dobbs is very mobile.
Yeah. Yeah, I like your Sean Davis idea. Sean Davis left the Steelers because he didn't want to be a backup. He didn't want to sign anything longer because he didn't want to be a backup. If Sean Davis is not going to win, did not win the starting job in Washington and was cut, if he wants to be if he realizes now that he's going to be a backup, that's a good backup. In my opinion, that's a good backup at safety. Because it's someone that can come in, but he wants the job. That's going to be the biggest thing when it comes to Sean Davis. But I would be all right with Davis. Who would he bump? That's tough.
I kind of feel like Dangerfield's pretty safe because of what you said about him being possible special teams captain. Who does he bump? I really think Riley's kind of safe too. So,
and Marcus Allen, if they don't have anything else at linebacker, maybe it's one of those things like with Tuzar Skipper, where they kept Pierre long enough that he wasn't in the first wave of stuff that then they could sneak him on. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know if it's a possibility. I'm just saying that one wouldn't shock me.
That wouldn't shock me either. They are making a move. They're going to make some kind of move tomorrow too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at that. So, but see, Sean Davis, he can sign now. He doesn't have to clear waivers because he's got his 4 accrued seasons.
I'm even talking trade. Something's going to happen. I mean, I'm not talking a trade with somebody that's well known.
Yeah,
there's going to be a guy like J.J. Wilcox when they brought him in for like a 4th rounder a couple years ago. When they make trades like that, when they brought Justin Gilbert, I'm not saying that those guys worked.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying, something's going to happen. There's going to be a breaking news story that you're going to have to be all over today.
Yeah, I'm sure. I gotta pay attention. Who knows? Maybe it's already happened. I missed it because we're still on here. We've got Dave Shipley throwing $5 into the tip jar, saying, "You guys rock." My box seat's in Jacksonville, but he says Jagoffville or a go bad Davis. So hopefully that means he's good to go to be at that game with Pittsburgh. That would be fantastic. Did I say in Pittsburgh? I meant against. I don't know what.
Against Pittsburgh. And if I can get down there, Dave, I will.
So this is anything you want to say. I still think you're going to have a lot of these guys and anyone that was cut that we were surprised about is prime candidate to be practice squad. When it's all said and done, the Kareth Whites, the Trey Edmonds, the Dion Canes, the Amara Darbos, the Ryan Switzers, the
Trey Edmonds.
I said Trey Edmonds. I think for sure he's going on the practice squad, but they can only have 6 that have that, of those type of guys. I could see a Jaron Elliott, I think Antoine Brooks, all those guys are going to be prime practice squad guys.
Calvin Taylor is a guy that I think will be.
That's the guy I keep saying, because he's the big 6'9"
guy, yeah,
6'9", 310 pounds out of Kentucky. And I think Henry Mondu will be on the practice squad.
And Deion Kane. If Deion Kane doesn't get grabbed, I would think that he's a guy that could come back.
Because if anything, I could see Trey Edmonds being on the practice squad as both an extra running back or to fill in at fullback if something happened with Derek Watt. So, Trajan Bandy, that's another guy, another defensive guy that I could see out there. Lots of guys like that. Can't name any other inside linebackers. They don't have any. They have them all on the team, and that's still only 4. So, Brian, anything else for the good of the order before we call it a show, wrapping up the initial 53-man roster for the 2020 Steelers?
Boys, girls, we're 9 days away.
I know.
It's happening. We are shaping up. This is nice. I mean, because we have had, and we've talked about this being the longest offseason. It really hasn't. It's been the same amount of offseason. However, when you don't have those mini camps, it's a longer offseason. And when you have no news, it's a longer offseason. So I really just want to say it's happening. We're going to be having football in 5 days from now. It's not Steeler football, but it's the Texans, it's the Chiefs. It's Thursday night that kicks it all off. We've got a full day Sunday, and then we're kicking off the doubleheader on Monday night against the Giants. I can't wait. It's happening.
Can't wait.
And Big Bro's in there. I mean, I know he's mouthing it right now.
Yeah.
That's his signature line. But you know what? We had up to 215 people in the live chat, and we went on spur of the moment. So, guys, we cannot do this without all of you. We cherish you in the live chat. We cherish you that aren't in the live chat, but that are downloading us later. Make sure you check us out on everything. And when it's up-to-date Steeler news, you're going to see it on behindthesteelcurtain.com. And then you're going to hear it again with everything that we have coming up on the podcast platform. So we are your one-stop shop, like Jeff Hartman likes to say.
Yeah, and what I'm going to say is, Steelers family, it's time to get the family back together again. I know some people that they weren't really sure what was going on, didn't know if this season would really happen. It's the off season. I'm ready to get excited yet. Now is the time to get excited. You have your 53-man roster. Regular week of practice next week. Here it comes. Here it goes. You're going to have our whole lineup of shows. We're going to keep coming at you. We want to thank you all for tuning in here today. Make sure you like the video on YouTube. Make sure you're giving that, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, giving us that 5-star rating. And I think there's no other way to end this, Brian, but to say, let's go Steelers.
Here we go.
Here we go. We'll see you all next time.